I'm going to read again. Project 5, repeated motif. Development of a pattern using historical measurement repeat systems with applications of 4 color relationships: monochromatic, analogous, complementary, and triadic relationships, or triadic schemes. 45 points total. This is for a Design 102 class. So, yeah. So develop a motif through research about signs and symbols, art center library, and the internet, and explorative drawing. At least 3 idea drawings, thumbnails, must be turned in. Consult with me to choose the best one for this project. So I want you to research some decorative motif that was used in a human culture, artistically, and also in a utilitarian way on different objects that were used by that culture. So you have to decide which culture intrigues you. Because we don't have access at this point to so many real books, you're going to have to go and research it online. Now, just a couple of days ago, the Art Center Library told me that they are open for business in a sense, and they sent me an email telling how to do it. Did you receive that as well?
Yeah.
Good, great. Well, you can go into the Art Center Library, explore the possibilities of that. And I hope nobody's waiting. Let's see, participants. I think everybody's here. And so you can go into the Art Center Library and look for your topic. The Art Center Library is one of the best libraries for this kind of thing in LA. So, you know, we're a design school, so we have books galore on this subject. And yeah, so you should be able to find things in the Art Center Library and also lots of stuff online. I also recommend 2 books that I usually have in class, and I actually have copies for the students to use. So one of the books is is Geometry of Design, and it was written by Kimberly Lamb. So you can look for that. It's actually on our syllabus, but I think I also included it in the sample bibliography for the project, but I can send it to you also. And The Power of Limits, which is a fantastic book because it actually shows the measurement systems and makes analogies and metaphors to other systems that exist in the world. And it's a great book for doing this project, but because you can't easily find the real books right now, and you can't really come to me for them, you're going to have to do this online. So you can choose your measurement system by just looking at the list and Googling it, and then your measurement or repeat system. And then you'll have to do the research by, as I said, using the internet or going into the Art Center Library. So today we're going to work on the motif, but part B is to choose a historical measurement system from the list given in class and turn in a researched essay explaining the history and current usage of your chosen system. For research sources, use the recommended books, The Power of Limits by Dotze. He was an architect, and he wrote a very moving statement about why he wrote the book at the beginning in the introduction, which I may read you. And then also the Geometry of Design, which I just showed you. So you can, if you wanted, you can order those books if you have the impetus to go further. Examples are the Golden Section, the Modular, the Ken, the Grid. All these systems set up mathematical relationships that govern the proportions and ways in which a motif could repeat. Do a line drawing that shows how your motif will repeat. At least 3 repeats, making a composition using the system you choose. So those are the first 2 parts of this project. Then we're going to, in part C here, you're going to do color studies. That's much further along in this project. And you're going to confer with me to find the best color study and format it into a larger composition, which we normally print and mount. But this time you're just going to show us the final composition digitally. So at the end of the project, as usual, I give you what has to be turned in. So you're going to turn in 4 designated folders. And you're going to do, finally, on the last day of class, an in-class presentation. If there are words that you don't understand, I put a color vocabulary list into the files for project 4, which was the last project we did. And I put them under, I think it was last week's .ed files. I put it in there. So there's a long vocabulary list for color that you can look at if you have any questions about what the words mean in these projects, these 2 projects on color. The last one and now this one are using concepts of color. But you did project 4 very successfully, so I think you all understand the words so far. Anyway, I want to do an introductory lecture today, talk, showing you what the projects look like and what we did in the past for these projects. So this is the project sheet, and you can print it out or just use it online. I put it into your .ed, and I also sent you these files for preparation for today's class. Okay, the measurement systems look like this. So I said some historic measurement systems that you can choose from. So the Pythagorean triangle, the Pythagorean lute, which is an interesting system, the golden section, the rectangle, the triangle, the ellipse, the golden rectangle, triangle, and ellipse, the Fibonacci sequence, arithmetic and geometric progressions, logarithmic spirals, and for example, the spiral growth pattern that is actually in these books. All of these systems, or many of them, are in the books that I recommend. Vitruvius's canon regarding human body proportions, squaring the circle, which Leonardo da Vinci and Albrecht Dürer were really interested in that. Root rectangles, the 1:2 ratio, which governs such things as the Japanese tatami mat. The ken was a Japanese measurement. Tantric diagrams, for example, the 9 triangles of the Sri Yatra. Mandalas, which are circles of unity. I'll be showing you examples of all of these things too. Rhombic cubes, the grid, prime number distributions, tessellations, fractals, reflection, mirroring, which comes from duality or goes to duality. Shows us duality, and the rule of thirds, which photographers use a lot. So all of these systems are ways in which you can repeat a motif. Why I do this? Well, I think you're going to find many occasions in the future when you're designing when you need to repeat. And you might say, well, how am I going to repeat this? What numbers am I going to use? What proportions should I use? And I don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel. These are systems that have been used for thousands of years throughout human history. For instance, the golden section, which is probably the most famous system that architects and designers and artists have used, was used by the Egyptians in building the pyramids. It was used by the Greeks extensively. So we're going to look at that in one of my introductory talks, I think next time. Right now, I want to talk about motif and how you're going to create a motif. Whoops. So motif is generally simple. We can, in our case, we're interpreting motif to be sign or symbol. Other types of motif are used for logos, for trademarks. So these will be very useful to you if you're in graphics or advertising, for instance. But motif doesn't have to be simply commercial. It also is used for other things, such as decorative motif. When you're designing, I mean, even if you were in illustration, if you were designing a border or a symbol that represented yourself as a designer, whatever. So it's a very useful visual concept. This is a poster that I saw, and I thought it was interesting because it uses the space really well, but it immediately says to us what it's meant to convey, the concept of dance. These were the symbols for the 1984, I think, Summer Olympics, and they were very, very simple again, but it conveys the idea of the sport that it's representing very succinctly and expressively. So talking about expressive, this is expressive type. There's actually a course at Art Center called Expressive Type. And the typeface conveys the kind of feeling that it was meant to when it was designed. For instance, this calligraphy typeface is very calligraphic. This typeface is very curly. Going down, this typeface, which says Paris Drops, it's about fashion in Paris, is very Art Deco, and so forth, all the way down. This one's supposed to be about hobos and hooligans, and it looks like that. So this one looks very Art Nouveau. So you can have type that also conveys an idea very, in a way, the motif could be a motif. So you can use type if you want. You can use the initials, your letters if you want to make a motif. For those of you who are in graphics. This was, let's move this out so you can see the, whoops. This was a picture that or a fountain actually, that I saw and took a picture of years ago when I was in Istanbul. And it's at the entryway to the harem in Istanbul, to an old harem that a sheikh had. So what I liked about this was that there were so many motifs within the fountain. It's inlaid mosaic work, stonework. And if you look, there's an outer flower kind of cluster. And then there are other geometric patterns where you can see stars, different types of stars inside. There's an outer border that has a kind of chest-like interlocking geometric motif, and then other motifs on the outside vertical rim. So there's just lots and lots of interesting motif or signage in this, signs, visual sign. So this was a picture of the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. And I was really taken again by how decorated it was. Here's a close-up so you can see that the decoration is mostly floral and vegetal, because in Islam, like in early Judaism, there was an edict against portraying the human figure and even animal figures. So I thought it was really beautiful though, and there are these interlocking patterns. Moving downwards, another picture of Islamic decoration, which I thought was really beautiful. A friend of mine sent this, very, very beautiful colors also. I took this again in a mosque in Istanbul because I thought it was interesting that on the inlaid rectangle above the stained glass windows, there was this calligraphic, and it's probably Arabic, writing motif. In Europe, A stained glass window, tons and tons of different motifs, some more geometric, some more organic, representing the Holy Ghost and the Ascension. Early American quilts, which I was really interested in just after my graduate school, and I was taking pictures in the Midwest of my friends' grandmothers and grandfathers' collections of quilts. So that was considered pieced work, which different cultures, many cultures have done, have used pieced work. So this is organized around a central figure, and all the others repeat that, and they are assembled around the center motif. So it's kind of a mandala. But you notice that it calls attention to the center by using a difference of value, lighter value in the middle and perhaps lighter value around the edge, but in the center, it's a mid value. So it doesn't just, it takes us in and out, as Samantha would say. Another pieced quilt, and another quilt that uses a very traditional motif called the log cabin. But if you look at this, it looks like big diamonds, right? Light and dark diamonds. That is totally done with value, with changes of gray value. Because actually the pattern itself, the log cabin pattern, are strips of material sewn around a center square. So I'm showing it on the screen to you. And if you look, every center is red. And then the way it's sewn together, you have a diagonal division of strips. So there's a half of the, on the diagonal, half of the square is divided in darks and half of it is lights. And that makes the diamond pattern that you're looking at. A slide or a picture of a wall that I saw in Germany years ago. And again, I was taken by how many visual motif there is on this wall. You have the sort of psychedelic doors, you have the coat of arms above the door, you have something in relief up here, I can't quite see what it is. You have a picture maybe of an ancestor or a low relief of an ancestor on the wall and so forth. Interestingly enough, motif can actually give us and tell us the history of an object. This was a wood chest that I inherited from my grandmother. And for years and years I had it, and I still have it. And a friend of mine said, have you ever researched the motif that's carved into this wood? And I said, no, as a matter of fact, I just like it, but I never have. Well, he started to look it up, and it turns out these birds that I thought were swans or some such, geese maybe, are actually pelicans. And the pelican pecks its own breast when there's not enough food in order to draw blood and give that blood to its young. So there are two little chicks here, and the bird is going to spit out or feed that blood to the young. Turns out that this it has been used historically as a symbol of Christ and of the martyrdom of Christ. And when we found that out, we started looking it up, and it turns out that it's used on, for instance, the flag in Georgia, or a symbol of the state of Georgia in the United States. In Russia, it was used as in the Eastern Orthodox Christian religion as a symbol of Christ. And then we started researching this panel on this chest, and we found out that this is the bleeding heart with two little chickens on the top. The bleeding heart was also a symbol of the martyrdom, or Christianity, a symbol of Christianity. But the fact that there's two little chickens made us think, what is that? So I asked an expert in Russian iconography, because it became apparent that because this is a Byzantine symbol on the left, that possibly this chest could have come from further east than we originally thought. It might not be German. It might be a chest from a wedding chest, she thought, from Russia. And it's quite old. So symbol and signs can give us a feeling for the history of a person or a culture. And that's kind of what I want you to research. You could also, if you were really interested in biology, you could do cell structure or seeds. or grasses, which are really beautiful. Here we have the outline of the twigs of a tree or the branches of a tree against the sky. And I went down into St. Gabriel and I saw this drawing of a porpoise on whatever boxes these are in a store. So right next to that store was another one where they had these carvings in jade. And I'm sure you all have seen them before. But to me, these shapes were really interesting and they could be included in a motif that you design. So how do we do this project? Well, we used to do it by hand, most of it by hand. So we would design the motif, we would do drawings of the motif in systems, and then we would paint it. This one just happens to look like a blend on the computer, but it was actually done very intelligently with color, with painted color. And I used to do mostly grids, but now I'm having students, and mostly because of what Art Center students started to do, I'm having us do the motif and then put it into different systems. Just to give you a preview, this was again kind of a grid, but it was with a basketball player, and we do analogous and complementary systems. This is the golden section. And then we, as I said, applied complementary and analogous colors. But now I actually ask you to apply monochromatic, complementary, analogous, and triadic. So you were to research. This student actually showed me the research that they did. This was the golden section and how this motif, which was a shirt and a hat without the figure, was repeated. This was the golden section again. And people did studies in different ways. I used to have them paint one and do one on the computer, but now we've mostly been doing it on the computer. If you wanted to paint it because you're just terrible at the computer, you still could paint it if you want at the end. But I think it's a pretty time-consuming project to do with paint because you actually repeat so many parts of the motif. So I think that it's one project that is really easier to do in Illustrator. This was a student who wanted to do the cardiogram, an echocardiogram. His stepfather was a heart surgeon, and he was interested in how echocardiograms showed the beating, the rhythmic beating of the heart. So he drew a heart, and then he showed literally what the beat looks like. So this was actually a painting, but we pretty much have gone to doing this project because it's more difficult enough to design it in Illustrator. So these were rhombic cubes, but the motif is actually this part of it, the small part within the square of the rhombic cube. This was a woman who was interested in psychology of the last 2 weeks of school at Art Center where things get really stressful. So she designed a kind of a graphical interface that represented different moods that she went through in the last 2 weeks. And every day she would put in another group of these rectangles and bars. And it ended up looking like this. A fellow who has become quite famous in the 15 years since he graduated from Art Center. He was a student in my first 5 years at Art Center, and he took his motif from, he traced the paintings on cave walls, famous cave paintings. And he chose 3, and then he chose one of them. And then he found the Ulam spiral, which is a astronomical arrangement of stars in a galaxy. And he put this into that. And it came out looking like that, or different versions of it were done in different colors too. So I'm just showing you motif now. This is in the golden section, repeated into a golden section spiral. But here's his motif, which is kind of a gears shifting. somebody who lived in Highland Park and was interested in the graffiti that he had seen in Highland Park. He called this dancing sprite. These are the motifs that a student who had actually received a degree in biology before he came to Art Center did. And he put them into patterns and ended up with this one, which represents the Fibonacci series and how it moves from the back to the front. He did it in layers. And this one, and the relevance of it is kind of interesting because of the maybe devastation that this little teeny virus is creating right now in society. This is actually a drawing of the budding or reproduction of cells, of cancer cells. His grandmother had just died of brain cancer. So the budding is in the negative space. These are the little cells. Can you see it? Like right here, this little thing. These are the budding of the cells. So they would start with a big one and then have another one sprouting off of it and then another two. And he made that the structure of this motif replication, and he then put color in it in different systematic ways. And it ended up being a very beautiful thing, which I thought was interesting because the idea of a cancer cell budding and killing somebody is really ugly, right? I mean, it's a horrible thing, but he made it into something really beautiful.
Did he? Was there a story behind the color choice in the patterns?
That's a good question, Marina. I don't really know. You know, I don't know the answer to that. But I think we just picked this one because it was very beautiful. But I don't know whether he chose the color because of her. I'm going to ask you to do blends and to make a palette from blends. So remember in the last project, we did blends, and that's how we set up our scales or swatch scales. You're gonna take those and you're gonna expand them and ungroup them and create color palettes from those blends. You can do tints or shades of the blends. We'll be doing that together later, so you don't have to really worry about that right now. But I just want you to know see what the final projects look like. And I don't know the answer to your question, but it's good. This was a woman who was interested in butterfly motif. She did a butterfly motif, and then she did various circular patterns with it and ended up with this one where she started to color it. And every single shape in this is a repetition of the butterfly motif. It was really beautiful. But she ended up with a humongous file. And at the time, I wasn't telling students to flatten their Illustrator files. If you have so many layers, the best thing to do is make a for print version and then flatten it and make it a PDF or a JPEG, and you can print it. But she had a lot of trouble printing it. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to do a lecture next time on there's my foo dog. I mean, it's not mine, not the one I showed you, but there's another foo dog that looks like Samantha's dog a little bit. It's somewhere guarding the entrance to a garden. So that's the introductory lecture for what you're going to do today. Next time, I'm going to give you a much longer lecture or talk about how motif has been used in different systems and the different systems themselves. And you'll just be amazed because many structures in the world that were made by designers and architects in history were governed by these rules. Things like the golden section, the Fibonacci series, the Pythagorean theories, and so forth. Spirals, lots of spirals that we see in design. And relationships of sizes, Fibonacci series type sizes. governed by the numbers of the Fibonacci series, for instance. So today, you are to think of a motif that you'd like to use and give me at least 3 of them. Here's a kimono that I saw in the recent Japanese animal show. And there's an animal in this. I guess it's a fish. So yeah, let's see. I want to show you some examples of what's been done, what was done in the last projects. So last semester, there were some really good ones. See if I can pick. So people literally did them sometimes with pen, sometimes with pencil, sometimes with pen, sometimes in Illustrator. And illustrators and graphic people usually design them rather with drawing and rather beautifully. But I would say that my photographers actually are a little bit looser about it, and they will use different materials. They've been very inventive with this project. They've used photographic motif, and I let them actually do it in Photoshop and kind of select the motif and isolate it. So this project can actually be applied to a lot of different disciplines. Let's see what she did with that. So the idea of it is to put it into a structure of some sort, and your structure then depends on the system that you pick. So I think this person might have just used the grid. Oh, this is an AI file. So she put the pieces into into the structure of a grid, and then she colored them analogous and complementary. And triadic. Wonder why I kept this one. I'm not sure why I kept this one. I think I liked one of them. And so I don't really have a rule for how you then fill it. But one thing that I do want you to do that she didn't do too well, actually, is to really make use of the negative space. So let's look at somebody else's here. Oh, I see. I'm in last semester. I didn't keep that one. It was just one that was, oh, okay. I'm in last semester's group. Which one did I really like in last semester? Okay, let's look at Hansen. He was an interesting student. So here's his motif, and he did quite a bit of drawing for his motif. So these are already in the structure. So you can see that he had a puzzle-like motif. Here he put it into a system called the Pythagorean lute, where things get smaller but interlock with each other. So his motif was a little robot. So he had an interlocking structure, a little triangle that looked dimensional, and this other thing that I liked best of all, which looked like a little robotic space station, but it was quite complex, more complex than a motif usually is. So I think these were the parts of his motif. He had a more complex motif. Yeah. And so those were his motifs. And in the end, he designed something with that. With the thing that we liked the best was the space station one. Going backwards, let's go to one of the other. Let's see, that was fall. Let's look at spring. Yeah, some of these were even better. So I'm looking at the ones that I want to show you the most. Yeah, so she showed me her motifs. She just drew them, I guess, in pink. Can you see that on the paper? It's a little light. So she was an illustration major, and there was a kind of a figure coming out of a sandwich, a figure coming out of a milk carton, and just a little angelic figure. You can show me your motifs if you draw them by hand, just like that, by taking a picture. And then she put it into structures. So the structures that she put it into, I'll show you all of these. These were her color studies. So you're going to have to show me the color studies and how you set up your color palettes that you're going to use. So I want you to do it. Yeah, you have to do it very systematically. I want to see the color studies. So here's her motif with the palette that she chose from the blend. And notice, I'm going to show you how to do this starting maybe next week, but she made a tint of one of the colors. There's some tints here. There's some of the true colors from the blend, and there's some darker shades of the colors. And then she colored her motif. She's going to put it into a system next, but she chose to color the motifs singly and then put in a different background. But you can also do it by using a part of the repeat and coloring right on the repeat itself. But she chose to do it in this, way. Here's her color system and the colors that she chose. And then here are some of the ways in which she applied, the color. But there's what she ended up with. I also don't want you to just put it on a background. I want the background to actually work in terms of the negative space. So she chose to make kind of a watermark, using parts of the, or part of another motif that she designed for this project. I prefer it when you actually work out a way for the system to create negative spaces that mean something. So that's a little bit more difficult. I think it's quite difficult, actually. Let's look at this one. So here's her motif. So notice that these are quite simple. And you're going to confer with me to pick one and to look at them and talk about them and pick one to work with. So then that's, and then you're going to write about it. You're going to tell me what your system is about. So you're going to pick a system and make a statement about it. So she's going to put this into a mandala. So the repeat system I chose is mandala. In history, it has a symbol. It is a symbol representing the whole universe, et cetera, et cetera. They are used mainly in Buddhism and Hinduism. So I want it to be at least a couple of paragraphs, like half a page to a page. You don't have to talk. I don't really want you to talk only about your symbol. In fact, I want you to talk more about your system that you're going to put it into. So I'm more interested in your finding a system to put the motif in that has been used in design historically. So this project is really more about researching the system than it is about your motif. I don't want this essay to be simply about the motif that you've designed. A lot of people kind of got into telling me why they liked the symbol that they designed or their motif, but it isn't, it's really about the system. I want you to research and understand what system, and this is the mandala system. This is actually a pretty good statement because she even references how some of the ways, or one way in which it's used currently or contemporaneously. These diagrams are given the name phylogenetic or phylogenetic mandalas. Mandali Mandrilla, a fashion designer, held an exhibition called Mandala of Desires in November 2015. So she actually looked at that. Then she gives me a bibliography, which I'd like you all to do. So the bibliography simply has to do where you found your information. And I include a sample bibliography in the files that I gave you. If you use a website, look at the way in which a website is referenced. You tell me what article, what the article's called, where you got it, like Wikipedia, what date the Wikipedia article, and then just give me the URL. So I'd like you to have 3 references.
So you want like a works cited instead of the bibliography?
That's okay too. I mean, quite a few people forgot to do either. So yeah, works cited is fine. And so then she did the drawing of her symbol within this. It's supposed to be your symbol within that system. And she did it very well. Look at this. So she showed me how she was going to put her motif into the system. This could be quite, you know, these have always, many of them have been very beautiful. And you could use these later for something that you're designing. This would be gorgeous as the top of a table or an inlay or something like that, right? Fabric, applique, just gorgeous. Shoot. I didn't mean to do that. And yeah, so she showed us the structure and the motif. And then you want to see her final pieces just because it's kind of interesting to see where this led her. So she did some analogous, here's her analogous ones. Originally, I was asking you to do analogous and complementary, but now it's 4 with different color systems that we've been studying recently. So here is her color swatches with the piece that she designed. I'll lift this up a bit so you can see it better. Can you see the whole screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one analogous one. Here's another analogous one. So you're going to meet with me twice, one to pick your motif, and the second time to choose a color system that works the best. And how you exactly decide on the color system, you're going to have it somewhat in the system. Some people chose to show me the whole piece. Other people chose to show me that motif. But generally, I think applying to color to most of the piece or a good part of the piece or the whole piece is a good idea, because look how much more she works with the negative space than the other person that I showed you. So notice that there are negative, this whole area around the center motif is negative, but quite a beautiful shape. And then it radiates there. The rows around the center are also negative shapes that are important to the design of this. So some of the ones that historically I've found really great. Let's look at our own Matthew, I think his is in here somewhere. I noticed earlier. Here's Matthew's, Matthew Yu. I don't know if he's still with us. He may have left. He's already taken this.
I'm right here.
You are?
Yeah.
So here's Matthew's. He did, these were in his sketchbook, I think.
Yeah.
So we decided that he should do his dog, or a dog. I'm not sure if it's your dog. So he wanted to do a tessellation, which when you research tessellations, people do them in, you know, grade school, but there's a whole way in which you have to do it. It's when one shape fits into another with no space between. So he wanted to do that. So he started drawing this dog. And then part B was to try to study the tessellation and start to understand how he was going to create this thing. So he did a really good statement about tessellations, which you can see underneath. And then I don't know, Matthew, how did you decide to cut these out and start to fit them together this way?
I don't think I really I don't know. I kind of just like fitted like their heads in between like the other dogs' ears, and then like I just like matched it like a puzzle piece, sort of.
Because it's a tessellation, but the meaning of tessellation often is that they're identical, but this group isn't, they're not identical. So you kind of had to keep fitting them into each other. Anyway, yeah, so I'll show you what happened. Then he did a nice statement here about tessellations and a bibliography. And then his part C was the, these were when we were still doing just complementary, and I had everybody do 2 complementary ones and 2 analogous ones. But we've changed it because the department, my department, decided that you should understand monochromatic color scales, which is the one that we did with one color and going to black and going to white. And then you're going to do a complementary, an analogous, and a triadic, which is the triangle. So here are his funny dogs in 2 complementary colors and 2 complementary colors. It's amazing how well they fit together. This would be great fabric. I always think of these as, you know, something that could be wallpaper or fabric or cut out of wood or a mosaic or something like that. And then here are his analogous ones. And I think we both liked, here's the funny, this one was in colors that dogs do not come in. Green and blue, yeah, green and blue. So I also said no white and no black. So you have to make, you notice that his background is a very light yellowish color or light green. So really I want no white and black in this at the end, just color. So you can use a very, very dark color or a very, very light color, very light, like 5% or something, but you can't use white or black. So some other ones that I thought were really good from the past. Wait a second. Yeah. And I'm going to show you some more in the future. I always show this one because I thought it was sort of extraordinary. He used the Pythagorean lute. And so he started designing motif. I think he already knew which one he wanted to use. This is a man eating his own brain. So he had a spoon in his hand, or I don't know, he knew what he wanted to do. This is another one and this is another one, but I think he liked the top one best, and I did too. So in the end, Whoops. Here his drawing for the Pythagorean lute. And the lute, if you study it, is a, I'll have to read you his statement, is a five-sided figure. I guess it's called a, what's five-sided? I forget. And it fits into another one, which fits into another one. It looks like this. So he wrote a paper about that, which explains it. So the lute of Pythagoras, I created a motif based on a type of fractal known as the lute of Pythagoras. The lute is essentially a progression of pentagons, each containing a pentagram. So it's really an interesting statement. If you want, I'll send that to you. But in the end, he said who he was influenced by. And I additionally saw this project as a good opportunity to create a visual pun, a man eating himself, which greatly interests me. So it looks like that. And when he applied color to it, and I think you should work with things that do kind of, you know, that really interest you in some odd way. I can see Victor getting interested in this. And then he applied color to it. And this is actually the piece, the final one that he then showed us. This was with complementary colors. This one was with complementary colors. And then, oh no, shoot. You can't go backwards. Okay, I have to go back into this. Sorry about that. That was silly. Part D. Here's his analogous ones. Notice that this one, although we looked at it in class and it was just so dark, right? It's very, very dark. So we all said, well, we like it. We liked sort of the way you can barely see the shapes. It's kind of subtle, but it doesn't work in terms of people being, this one's boring. And I said, you know, with all of this, and Seymour Chast, who's an illustrator who he was really influenced by, was from the 50s. So I said, you know, I like the two complementary ones because they stand out more, but this one really looks, it has a kind of retro feeling that I really like. And so he blew this up. I mean, he enlarged it and printed it. And I really love the way he just included some of the line and left some of the other line. I'm trying to make this bigger so you can see it better. And in the end, it was so good that, how do I lift this up so you can see it? Oh no, not that again. We're in preview and it's really hard to manipulate preview. Oh well. Anyway, that it was put in the president's office, the president of Art Center, that is. And that is not part of it, this little weird thing there. Wait a second. Let me try to. Yeah, so anyway, these can be quite humorous and quite successful. But I want you to, in the end, what we're going to do is design a color system that you apply to it. And you'll have time to decide exactly what you need to apply to your motif put into your system. The reason I go through so much of this right now is that you kind of have to know what you're getting into and that you're going to use this motif in a system where the negative space should be just as important. I mean, how the negative space works, whether it's all going to fit together, even here, the negative space is really important. Okay, questions?